It's kind of wild to think that just 2 decades ago, the entire U.S. presidency came down to 537 votes in Florida. It was the ultimate swing state. But today, it's something else entirely. It's become a laboratory for this really potent fusion of religion and politics. So, how on earth did that happen? Let's get into it.
The speed of this change is just stunning. This wasn't some slow political grift. The sources we're looking at point to a highly organized, very deliberate movement, one that sees politics not just as, policy debates, but as a full-blown spiritual mission.
And that right there is the key to this whole explainer. If you really want to understand Florida's new political reality, you first have to get your head around the theological worldview that is actively shaping its laws, its courts, and its schools.
Okay, so here's the plan. We're going to start with the core idea behind all of this. Then, we'll look at the political machine that's making it a reality, see their actual takeovers of state institutions, follow the money, and finally, break down how this whole Florida model is designed to go national.
All right, first up, the ideological blueprint. To really get the political strategy, you have to understand the spiritual justification that's driving it. And that brings us to this powerful and, for a lot of people, pretty unfamiliar concept, the Seven Mountains Mandate.
And this is the absolute key. The goal isn't just to influence culture, it's to dominate it. This idea basically reframes political action as a divine duty, a kind of spiritual warfare to conquer the main pillars of society for Christ.
So what's so fascinating here is that this isn't just a list of ideas, it's a battle plan. Each one of these mountains is seen as a territory that has to be taken over. And as we'll see, this exact list becomes a very real strategy for taking control of everything from local school boards to state agencies.
But look, an ideology is just an idea, right? To turn it into actual law, you need a machine. So let's look at how this theological concept gets translated into real-world political power.
These are some of the key people who are turning church pulpits into political command centers. A huge part of this is the new Apostolic Reformation, or NAR. It's a fast-growing movement that believes modern-day prophets should be taking authority in society. So these figures aren't just pastors, they're political organizers, and they're building a really powerful, coordinated network.
And check this out. This is one of their most effective tools. Groups like the Christian Family Coalition, or CFC, use these legislative scorecards to keep politicians in line. If a lawmaker votes their way, boom, they get a perfect score. They get campaign support. But if they step out of line, even if they're a fellow Republican, they get targeted. It's an incredibly effective way to keep the state legislature marching in lockstep.
So you've got the ideology, and you've got the political machine. Now let's look at the results. How is this network actually conquering those mountains of influence inside Florida?
Okay, our first case study is the Education Mountain, and the target was this place called New College of Florida. Now, why go after a small, progressive public honors college? Well, because it was a huge symbolic prize. Taking it over wasn't really about one school. It was about showing that they had the power to completely gut a secular institution from the top down. This wasn't a gradual change. It was a rapid, strategic conquest.
This timeline just shows the sheer speed of it. It was like a shock and awe campaign. Within weeks, the president was fired, the diversity office, DEI, was eliminated, and the school was on its way to being remade into what its supporters call a Hillsdale of the South, based on a well-known conservative Christian college. And the move sent a clear message to every other public university in Florida. Get in line, or you could be next.
All right, so the next conquest targets the government mountain, specifically social services. The initiative is called Hope Florida, and it's led by the First Lady, Casey DeSantis. And it represents a really fundamental change in how the state provides for its most vulnerable people.
So what we're really seeing here is a deliberate move away from the traditional state-run safety net. Instead, Hope Florida creates a system where social services are basically outsourced to churches and other faith-based groups. This is the Seven Mountains Mandate in action, transferring a core function of the government directly to religious allies.
Now, a political and spiritual mission this huge requires a ton of money, and it's often coming from sources that would really prefer to stay in the shadows. So let's follow the money.
That's the big question, right? This kind of long-term, highly coordinated project to transform institutions doesn't just happen by itself. It is fueled by a network of wealthy, ideologically driven donors.
So according to investigative reporting, one of the key financial engines here is a group called Ziklag. The easiest way to think of it is as a highly secretive investment network. But instead of funding tech startups, it connects wealthy donors with organizations that are fighting the culture wars. It's the money behind the Seven Mountain strategy, not just in Florida, but all over the country.
And if you want to know just how big their ambitions are, you don't have to guess. This direct quote from Ziklag's own vision statement leaves zero doubt. This isn't about winning one election. This is a multi-generational plan to completely remake American society based on their specific religious and political blueprint.
And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Florida is not an island. The strategies and the laws that are being perfected there are designed from the ground up to be a replicable model for other states to copy.
So when we talk about this Florida model, here are the core pieces we've been looking at. It's a whole strategy. Use state power to crush the laws of liberal cities, turn education into a tool for cultural programming, weave faith groups into the fabric of government, control who gets to vote, and then make sure the courts will back it all up.
And this isn't just a theory. Groups like the American Legislative Exchange Council, you probably know it as ALEC, they bring corporate lobbyists and state politicians together to write bills. They work with think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, and they take the legislative wins from Florida, turn them into model bills, and then shop them around to lawmakers all across the country. It's how you create a national blueprint. And so, what's been happening in Florida really forces a much larger question for the whole country. The sources we've looked at detail this deliberate, incredibly well-funded, and theologically driven project to merge religious authority with state power. Whether this model can last and just how far it's going to spread, well, that remains one of the biggest questions in American politics today.